Hello and welcome to Where You Lead, a podcast where we, a real-life mother and daughter duo, rewatch Gilmore Girls and discuss the misadventures of fictional mother and daughter duo Lorelai and Rory Gilmore. I am Tessa Dare, a writer and the author of the paranormal mystery series The Karanzan Chronicles and Beth's Daughter. And I am, I guess, technically on my second coffee of the day, although they are these little frizz coffee bottles. I call them my coffee sodas. It's carbonated coffee.
Coffee sodas.
Yeah, it's slightly sweetened carbonated coffee, and they're smaller than a normal cup of coffee, so it feels like a low coffee day for me.
And I am Beth, Tessa's mom, and also a writer. Tess and I have been talking about art and culture pretty much since she could read. These conversations have frequently taken on a marathon quality, so at some point, one of us said we should move our discussions to the digital world, maybe even into a podcast. The Gilmores seemed like a good choice because the story resonates with us. I was a single mom of a teenage daughter attending a private school we could not afford. Many of the show's plot lines touch on topics we like to discuss, such as images of women in popular culture, structural elements of storytelling, such as character development, and music and movies in general. This is our second to last podcast, or as Trevor Noah says, podcast, on the Gilmore Girls, because we have reached a point where we feel a need to look at the broader landscape of women in movies and television. We don't have it all figured out yet, but we will have more details for you in our last episode. A final note, I am recording in St. Louis and Tess is in Seattle. I have had a large cup of coffee from Bread Cove this morning, and I've kind of been nursing it on and off all day, finally finished it, and I'm still tired. But I'm ready. Let's go.
And we now have a Patreon. If you would like to support us on Patreon, you can find us at patreon.com/whereyoulead. And yes, this is the second to last episode of the first season, so we will be finishing the first season before we move on to our new format. Every week, we start off with a synopsis of the episode along with the date it aired before heading into our discussion.
Today we are discussing Season 1, Episode 20, P.S. I love... ... Love is the word that is not spelled out, which originally aired May 3rd, 2001.
Yeah, and for a brief description, basically, Rory's in a bad mood, it's not getting better, and she and Lorelai end up having an unexpectedly nasty fight over it, and nasty on Rory's part. And then she runs away to the grandparents' house.
Yeah, Rory kind of feels like she's being overly protected and lied to, or not lied to, but like people are keeping things from her in all aspects of her relation, all of her relationships. So she's feeling a little put upon in this episode. We open with her and with the two of them getting breakfast, I guess, or at least morning coffee at Luke's, and it's one of those scenes where you gotta wonder, do they ever eat a full meal at home? other than pizza and poptarts. Yeah. But she's yawning, saying she's not been sleeping well, which I can completely relate to. Her mother's telling her a story at some point, and she just yawns right through it. Mm-hmm. And then they end up playing a game, because Lorelai thinks she needs to wake up before she goes to school. Imagine that. So it's a 1, 2, 3 game and it's a stupid game. It's a really stupid game.
It's pretty dumb.
First of all, you have to assume that somebody's going to walk past the window, which I guess is a valid assumption in Stars Hollow, which is a small town. But two men walk by, an older one, and then one on a skateboard, maybe?
Yeah, a much younger one. Yeah,
much younger. And so the point of the game is as they walk by, you have to choose one you're going to marry.
Yeah, and you only get three
shots. And so the first one is too old, the second one is too young, and the third one, Goldilocks, is Kirk. Anyway, so why wasn't it Luke? Why doesn't he count? Because he does come to
I think because
the table.
He didn't walk past the window specifically.
Yeah, I guess that's it.
But I feel like that is also an intentional thing where like the show is setting you up for like he should be the one.
Yeah, definitely. And then they get out. They say, I guess that's the end of the opening scene.
Yeah, pretty much. Kirk walks in and Lorelai and Rory are kind of like laughing over the fact that it's him, and he gets confused and walks back out. And Lorelai says something like, "No, Kirk, come back. I love you."
The actor in this scene playing Kirk looks so young. We've seen him recently in, at least I have, in other TV shows, and that's how I was visualizing him. When I looked at him closely, I thought, man, he was young there. He looks like he's about 22. But go ahead. What you were going to say?
Well, then the scene takes a dark turn right before going to the credits, because the next is Rory's turn, and of course the first person who walks past the window is Dean, and she gets immediately upset. And then we do go to the credits, I think, after that. And the next scene after that is Max calls Lorelai to ask her out on a proper date after they've been talking on the phone for a couple of weeks. I made no notes about that except to say that it happened.
Okay, because my next note is salt and vinegar chips from Lane. So I don't know which one of those two scenes happens first. But...
I believe the Max thing happens first, but I don't think it's a very long scene. And then we go immediately into Lane coming out of the market with stuff for Rory.
Yeah, and she's gone in to do it because she knows that Rory doesn't want to see Dean, who works in the market. So turns out that it's Wednesday and he doesn't work there. And they've established this before, that he doesn't work in the market on Wednesday. Yeah. So I don't know why they had to reestablish it. But anyway, so she brings all this stuff out to her. But I wrote down salt and vinegar chips because I thought, oh, man, one of the things I love about this show is that they like things that I like. So she gives her a bag of salt and vinegar chips and a copy of the New Yorker. And I thought, that's a good friend. And those are the kind of details that I love about this show.
And she being Lane also like says to Rory something along the lines of, he doesn't work on Wednesdays, so you can make a little note in the secret list that you keep that you don't want me to know about for some reason. And like, sure enough, Rory ends up taking out like the world's tiniest notebook and makes a little note in there.
And she's resistant during the entire scene to admitting that she had sent Lane in because she didn't want to see Dean. And there's a resistance on Rory's part throughout the episode, to let other people in to what she's feeling. She doesn't want to share. She doesn't want to reveal herself. Yeah. And she also feels like it's kind of what she thinks they're picking on her, but what they're really doing is trying to protect her. And at some point, she realizes that and says, tells people, stop trying to protect me. Yeah. And, well, the reason they want to protect you is because you are being such a recluse with your feelings. You're not sharing. And with the people who are closest to you, Lane and her mother. She doesn't want to talk to them at all about why she and Dean broke up, which, by the way, it's been 4 or 5 episodes. Yeah. I mean, we've gone through quite a bit of content since the episode where they broke up, and yet here we are back at it like it was yesterday, which is a weird thing about this episode, I think. So, but I guess it's because it's coming up on the end of the season, and they have to have some kind of a resolution on this. So
yeah, and I think they're setting us up for the next episode, which I won't say, but I think this whole episode is kind of setting us up for the next episode, which is the season finale.
Yeah, it's season finale in several different ways, and that's one of them. So then there's a scene with Lorelai and Luke, and so he's buying a gift for his girlfriend. Rachel. I guess we can call her that, Rachel. Yeah. But it's a pretty awful gift. And he says, I hate gifts. I don't want to go to the mall. What does he say? Employees are underpaid. Yeah, the goods are overpriced, and there's terrible parking.
And it contributes to like the commercialization of society or something. It's like it's a very like anti-capitalist rant. I was with him on the rant.
It's a very Luke rant. I mean, he's given us several rants like this over the course of the season.
Kind of funny to hear it now, because the show is 20 years old. At the time, malls were still like very big and potentially like growing into new places. Now, most malls are dying. There are fewer than there were before. There's like a whole new genre of, they call it like the new gothic genre, where people break into dead malls and take pictures of all the decay and stuff.
I have not seen that, but I believe it.
Yep.
A lot of malls have been torn down.
Mm-hmm.
Some have been repurposed into, there's been discussion of repurposing them into housing, which is, like low cost housing, which is desperately needed. So it's an interesting scene, but she convinces him. She says, "I know you don't like the mall, but I love the mall. I love shopping." She's really hyped up here. I mean, she's she had 15 cups of coffee.
She's like manic this whole episode.
It's whole episode. She's manic, yeah. So she gets his credit card from him and says, "You know what? I will just go and buy a bunch of stuff. You can keep what you want, and I'll return the rest. It's all on me. So you can just pick what you want for her." So she does that. And before we can get to the scene, the follow-up scene to that, though, there's a couple of other scenes. One is where Mrs. Kim is just hilarious. This is what I have down as the next scene. I don't know about you.
Yeah, you're correct.
But this actress is incredible. She's
great.
It's a stereotype, but she really just kind of punches through the stereotype and makes it all her own. She's remarkable.
Fantastic comedic timing, for sure.
She really does. She's just perfect. But apparently Dean is Lane's science partner on the project that they are working on, because the two of them still go to the public high school. So they've been partnered on this project, and they didn't request it, but she is keeping it from Rory. And of course, we know as soon as he walks in the door that he's the science project partner, and because they kind of, in the previous scene where they were talking, Lane asked Rory what she's going to be doing that night, and we think that's harmless at that point. And she says, "Oh, I've got homework, and that's going to be followed up by homework." And then Lane says she's got a science project she's got to work on with a partner.
Yes.
So I think what she's doing in that scene is making sure that Rory is going to be busy. So because she knows that it's Dean that's going to be coming over, and there's nothing she can do about it, I assume she's been assigned.
She also, I did notice in that scene that she said science partner and did not say who. And there was a part of my brain that was like, oh, it's probably Dean.
It didn't even occur to me at that point because I wasn't sure what was going on yet. But then when it gets to that scene, it all makes sense.
Oh, also, this is just a tiny detail, but I don't know if you noticed this. When they first go to sit at the table, because Mrs. Kim forces them to sit at opposite ends of the table and tells them they're not allowed to move. When that happens, you can see that there's like a chair hanging over Dean's head. Like she has strung a chair from the ceiling. It's crazy. It's like the room is, because this is Mrs. Kim's Antiques, it's always packed with stuff. It's so packed with stuff that she has hung a chair from the ceiling. I guess because she didn't have another place to put it.
That's funny. I was focused on the dialogue because they're talking, and she's trying to convince her mother. Lane's trying to convince Mrs. Kim that Dean is just there for the science project. She asks her what it's about. She says, "Oh, spores and molds and fungus." And Mrs. Kim says, "Reproduction?" Yeah. She keeps finding questions to ask them to make sure this isn't a date or a salacious activity. So,
I'm almost surprised she didn't just like sit down between them to watch them work.
But the other thing too is as soon as Dean shows up, we know that Rory's going to show up. So that's kind of it's like, well, anyway, so then we cut to, they start working on their project. They come to some kind of agreement that they can do this.
And Rory does come in. Then she gets upset and runs away, and Lane tries to run after her to apologize, but Rory is very not receptive to it. She won't admit that she's angry, but she also clearly does not want to talk to Lane. And then the next scene is actually a continuously manic Lorelai waking Rory up, and Rory's super grumpy, and Lorelai is I guess jazzed on the idea of going to the mall. She wakes Rory up and offers to let her skip school so that she can come to the mall with her, but Rory does not want to do that. Again, she refuses to admit that she's in a bad mood, and then they have this one exchange that very clearly exemplifies the two different moods that they're in, where Rory's looking for her tie, and Lorelai suggests it might be in the living room, and Rory says, "Why would my tie be in the living room?" And Lorelai, kind of giddily responds, "Because it's been seeing the doily on the coffee table. I'm sorry, I did not want you to find out this way." And Rory's just not having it. She just says, "Don't take this personally, but get out."
Well, and I think Lorelai has taken a day off so she can just do fun stuff. She doesn't have a high-pressure job, but it is kind of it's a busy job. It's a job that keeps her, it's, probably a 24/7 kind of job because there are people at the end.
Yeah, it's also probably a job where it's easier for her to take off in the middle of the week than over the weekend.
Yes, and I think this is a Thursday at this point.
Yeah.
So she's taking the day off. She's really excited about that. She wants Rory to skip school because, again, the roles here in their relationship are always reversed.
Yeah.
Rory is always the responsible one. Lorelai is almost always the irresponsible one. So she goes to the mall and she buys everything under the sun. In fact, when she gets the next scene, when she's walking into Luke's shop with 15 bags on her arms, she puts them down, then goes back out and gets some more. And and then when she opens them up, and because you're sitting there as she's doing this, it's a visual gag, and I'm thinking, is all of that for him, or all those gifts? Or did she go on a shopping spree for herself? But turns out that she did pick out 2 really wonderful gifts. A book.
For
What
Rachel.
was the book?
Yeah, it's a book, Out of Africa, by
Isaac
Dennison.
Yeah. And there was a movie made about it. Meryl
Yes.
Streep was in it.
Yeah, I did look up the summary very briefly, and it sounds like exactly the book that you would expect that is called Out of Africa, written by a white woman. It's
Yeah. Oh, totally.
So,
yeah.
The
Well,
title
I think
tells you-
fairly wealthy white woman. Yeah.
Yes, wealthy white woman. Yeah,
Mhm.
she was a
Yeah.
baroness at one point.
Oh, yeah. That doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen the movie all the way through. I thought it was a little boring. But I guess she'd had a conversation with Rachel, and maybe she'd seen the movie, and
Yeah, I
she
think she'd
wanted
seen the
to read the
movie,
book.
but she hadn't read the book, and Lorelai told her that she has to
Oh,
because Isaac
you've got
Dennison
to read
is
the
wonderful,
book, yeah.
which was a lie. She's never read it, but Rory had.
Rory had, yeah. So, of course, Rory
Yeah,
had. Rory's read everything. So she gets her a copy of the book, and it's a beautiful, hardcover book. And then she also gets her a new camera bag.
Yeah.
Rachel is a photographer, and she has traveled all over the world taking photos for, we have to assume, magazines like National Geographic, that kind of thing. So she has a camera bag that is falling apart, and it's a lovely leather bag. But as they are admiring it, she shows it to Luke, who does think it's a good idea. But I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know if she really does travel all over, the world. If she goes to Africa, is this really the kind of bag she's going to want to take? Her scruffy falling apart one is probably a better one. But anyway, that's off topic.
Although,
but
leather, I will say, like, leather holds up really well. So
it does.
It is a sturdy bag, I would assume. And it also, like, it's pretty easy to clean. So even if she's going to be in, like, really dusty places, like, I do think ultimately a leather bag is probably going to be better in the long term than a nylon bag.
It's a wonderful gift, and she's chosen really well, and Luke appreciates it. But then he says, well, what is all this other stuff? So she starts pulling out. She was driving me crazy. She starts pulling out clothes for him. Oh, here's 2 black sweaters, and here's a suit, and here's a belt.
175% off.
And then she goes all the way up to $600,000, 600,000% off.
Yes.
And of course, I don't know if you noticed it, but later on when he's got the suit on and he pulls the price tag out and he's standing there looking at it dumbfounded. But so we don't know what the price is. We never get to that. But she's got all these clothes for him that don't really seem to fit his personality. He's he's kind of a scruffy beach bum looking kind of guy, wears his hat, baseball cap backwards. But on the other hand, if he does want to take her out to dinner on her birthday, she didn't buy him a tie. She bought him a sweater to wear under the suit. It's a very cool look. GQ is what they said at some point.
GQ.
It's a very GQ look, and it is.
Yeah, it's a bit more modern. It's definitely not as stuffy as, like, a suit with a tie. It's certainly not something that her father would ever wear.
No.
And it does look like it's relatively comfortable. To make it more Luke, maybe she could have just gotten him a nice shirt and told him to wear it with jeans,
Yeah.
I guess, like, I do live in Seattle, which is a city where men in particular, don't necessarily dress that nice all the time. But usually my partner can just get away with wearing a nice shirt and jeans to any restaurant that we go to.
Yeah.
The one exchange that they have that I thought was really funny, I did think that Lorelai was kind of crazy in
obnoxious. She was obnoxious.
Yeah, she was a bit obnoxious. But she's like begging him to try it on. And she goes, just this once, be too sexy for your shirt and do a little dance on the catwalk. And he says, "Get away from me, you mental patient."
Yeah, it's insane. It's really, really insane. So, and not even funny, not even in a cute way. She just comes off as being
I think
obnoxious.
it's just, yeah, I mean, like, I think some of her lines are funny, but it's just, she's just at, like, such a
Yeah.
high level. She does mention at some point that she like, got buzzed off of 2 sugar cinnamon pretzels. So I think maybe in this scene, we're supposed to see her as, like, she's just still on that sugar high. But it's, like, the
Yeah.
whole episode she is this way.
The whole episode, she's out of control. So then, is the next scene at Rory's school?
Yeah,
right?
yeah, Rory in Max Medina's class.
And this is a question. So he's teaching, and we're not sure exactly what he's teaching at first, but he's talking about a book that is not actually on their syllabus that he encourages them to read called The Art of Fiction. So I looked that up because it sounded familiar, and there are like 14 books called The Art of Fiction.
Yeah,
and I thought, and one of them's John Gardner, that name I recognize, and one of them is Henry James. And I thought, oh, maybe he's talking about Henry James. And then sure enough, they picked, what he wants them to do is that they are reading Henry James. And he said, you have the choice to pick which Henry James novel you want to read. I don't know that he wrote that many.
He did write a couple, but I would say, like, if you're given the choice of which one to read and Daisy Miller counts, you should read Daisy Miller because it's super short. It barely qualifies as a novel.
Yeah. I think even I've read that one. It's actually really interesting seeing and kind of showcases Max as a teacher. He's a pretty good teacher. I mean, he comes across in that scene anyway. He's a pretty good teacher.
Although I did have a question. My question was, okay, so their assignment is to pick a Henry James book and then write a report on it. And it's due in a week.
There's that word again.
Yeah, so like first thing is like
I don't really know.
Yeah, I don't know anyone who had to do book reports in high school. Like by the time we were in high school, there were like you had to do argumentative essays, not book reports.
Right.
But the
other private prep school, so yeah.
But the other point is, it's not clear from the scene whether they have already read multiple novels by him and they just have to pick one of the ones that they've read, or if they're supposed to pick one and read it in under a week and then write their report on it.
It's not clear, and yeah, almost makes me wonder if the writers actually finished college or went to college. Finished college, because presumably they went to college. But report? Essay. It's one word. Write an essay on it and, make a case for something. Like you said, argumentative essay. So that's all you have to do. I mean, and usually most of the teachers I've ever had would give you a choice. Here's 5 topics. But I guess if he's letting them choose the book, what a good teacher would say, choose the book, let me know what the book is, I'll give you 5 topic options for that book. They're trying to set him up to be a good teacher, and he is a good lecturer.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's interesting because I have, as we have mentioned before, I've watched a lot of teen dramas from this time, and I will say that I think Gilmore Girls gets it much more correct than most teen dramas do. Not necessarily in the assignments, but like they do, like it's very clear that the writers do actually like know the names of well-known writers who are considered part of the classics. That they actually do a lot of name dropping here that implies that they do to some extent know what they're talking about. But that's really only if I compare them exclusively to other teen dramas where, you basically only ever get like a reference to Shakespeare, maybe, and it's usually Romeo and Juliet because it's a teen drama, and if you're doing Romeo and Juliet, you can do a kissing scene. So if you compare it to an actual school, like your actual experience in school, and it's been a while for me, but I do still remember how these assignments go, and they don't go like this. It's just like when they were studying for the English test, and for some reason that involved rote memorization of dates and nothing else.
Yeah. And you and I are 30 years apart in terms of when we were in school. Same for me. I actually don't think I wrote a book report, quote unquote, after grade school.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I think that's a grade school thing, and it's a very specific kind of report. And it's basically, it's one page, the title, the main characters, and they're introducing the idea of, themes and character development and all that, but it's usually just one page. It's not very in depth. So by the time you get to even 7th grade, they were getting into, the 3-paragraph essay.
Mm-hmm.
It may also only be 1 page, but it's a much more analytical approach.
Yeah.
And by high school, forget it. It was all essays. And actually, my school, each year was a different, just like in college, each year was a different period in literature. So like freshman year, it was American literature, because Huckleberry Finn. And I don't remember the other year. Isn't that terrible? And of course, final year was AP. But so they're sophomores, I assume, because there's 16, maybe 17. We're not sure. It's never been clear. But they're sophomores. So what era are they studying in this class? Who knows?
At my school, I don't think we really did, like, each year was a different period, but they would sometimes line up certain things that we were reading with the history class. Now, part of this is because it was a very small school, so they could do that. But, like, we would, I distinctly remember we started reading Dante around the time that in our history class, we were studying the period that he was writing in, and that was intentional. They lined it up a little bit because they could do that.
Oh, in this scene, Rory's kind of looking at the windows. He's a little distracted. Yeah. She doesn't really hear the assignment. He picks on her. Yeah. And says, "Miss Gilmore, did you get that?" And she says, "No, I really didn't." So he says, "Okay, come up after class and we'll talk." And at that moment, and we have to remember that the last episode, Rory and Paris, who had started to get along, I don't even remember what happened, but something happened, and they're bickering again.
Oh, I think it was that Rory tried to set Tristan and Paris up, and then he rejected Paris. Yeah, and she kind of blamed Rory for that, because I think she had not realized that Rory had gotten him to ask her out. Yeah. So she's kind of mad at Rory for what Rory's currently mad at everyone else for. Yeah. Trying too hard to help her out. Although like Paris's actions in this scene are kind of interesting, because she does notice that Rory is not paying attention, and she does alert her friends. And then Max tries to call on Rory, and Rory just doesn't notice. And then Paris pushes her book off of her desk to make like a loud thumping noise, and then goes, "Oops." I feel like they're trying to say that she's trying to be mean, but it almost felt like she was doing Rory a favor, because it feels like it would have been worse. Like, that's what gets Rory's attention, is the loud noise of the book thumping on the floor. And it almost feels like the situation would have gotten worse if Rory had continued to not notice.
That was a very interesting thing to do. I'm like you. I'm confused. I don't know if it was mean.
It's all we see of Paris in this whole episode, and it's kind of confusing.
and right after that, Max is talking to Rory, and I actually kind of like Max in this scene, because he definitely comes across as a good teacher and someone who cares about Rory, but then he also reveals in the conversation with her that he and her mother have started to talk again, and they may be starting to date again. Yes. Which is something that Rory didn't know about, and she gets upset about that. She thinks people are keeping things from her, and just like Lane didn't want her to know that Dean was coming over for a project because she wanted to protect her. Yeah. Her mom hasn't told her that she's talking to Max because she wants to protect her, because she's just broken up with her own boyfriend. Yeah. And she explains later on in the episode where, you're going through this breakup and I'm going back to my boyfriend again. I'm your mother. I'm supposed to understand. I'm supposed to be sensitive. I know I can't imagine how that would make you feel. And I didn't want you to have to go through that until it was absolutely necessary, clearly. But she doesn't know that yet. She's just upset.
So the next scene is Luke and Lorelai in the diner again. Luke has apparently off-screen acquiesced to Lorelai's request to try on the clothes. Which is surprising. Yeah, it's a bit surprising, and he comes out in the clothes, and he looks good. He
looks great.
It's certainly not his usual look, but yeah, he looks fantastic. They're like well fitted. He looks great in black. He's kind of like hunching his shoulders, which kind of dampens the effect a bit, but it does feel like that is what Luke would do. But no, he looks great, and you can tell that Lorelai is pleased.
It is a very GQ look, but my question was, how does she get those sizes so right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I am not sure.
I mean, it's a really good fit.
Yeah,
so.
It's a very good fit. I mean, magic of television. But then kind of the crux of the scene is he puts the belt on slightly wrong, and Lorelai just like comes over to fix it for him and is like touching him and like intimately
it is at his waist
his
in
belt.
a very intimate way. Yes.
She like pulls up his shirt a little bit to see it. Like she's just like it's one of those things where it's like, you know, if you are close friends with someone, that might not be that weird, but they are also doing this in the middle of the diner.
I would maybe do that with my brother and my son, but
yeah,
a man that she's attracted to, that she's admitted, you know, that she's attracted to, no, that's inappropriate. It's very intimate.
It's
Lorelai all over the place.
That's true, and she's been so manic this episode. And of course, Rachel, the sort of girlfriend, comes in right at that moment and sees it, and you can see on her face that she feels like she has walked in on something weird. She doesn't say anything, and Lorelai just kind of like laughs it off and then leaves, but it's just like, yeah, if I walked in on Lorelai adjusting my boyfriend's belt like that, I would be concerned at a minimum.
I think I would too. And they don't even explain it. You know, that she kind of, like you said, brushes it off and walks out.
Yeah, she says that she's dressing him, but they don't explain, like, I bought him these clothes so he would look nice for you.
Yeah, and but it's a surprise for her, so she doesn't want to spoil the surprise. But
the surprise
is still
kind of already spoiled though, because she can see him in the clothes. But it's a pretty short scene, and then we move on to Rory getting off the bus.
That's a great. I mean, and the thing is, my first thought was, oh, Lane is such a good friend. She's sitting there with 2 cups of coffee at the bus stop, waiting for her best friend to get off the bus. And it's just really sweet. Yeah. So she hands a cup of coffee to her, and Rory is mad. I mean, not about the coffee, but she's just, she doesn't want to be protected, but she's the one making everyone else act that way because she's not opening up.
And she's acting kind of fragile. Like, she's acting depressed. Yep. The smallest things seem to set her off.
Yeah.
And, you know, and in this scene, I think she's more mad at Lorelai than Lane, because she has just learned that Lorelai is talking to Max again. And I do feel like that is I totally get Lorelai's reasoning, but I do think that is a bigger violation than what Lane did, because Lane couldn't help what she did. You know, like, Lane did not choose to be partners with Dean. It was assigned to her, and she was just trying to not let Rory know about it, and it makes sense that she didn't want Rory to know, because she correctly guessed that it would make Rory upset.
I think they're both equal. I don't think what her mom did was any worse than what Lane did, because really they've only been talking for 2 weeks, and it's only been on the phone. Although we also know that she did show up at his house 2 weeks before, and they had sex. But
the thing is that, like, they dated before, and it was a rough breakup, and we learned before that the biggest issue there was Lorelai not being honest with Rory about stuff. And he is Rory's teacher, so I think that like does much more directly affect Rory. So I think from Rory's point of view, that would feel like a bigger violation. Though I agree, I do understand Lorelai's reasoning, and I don't think she was wrong. I just think from Rory's point of view, I could see that being a much bigger deal. But
the point is that they are both trying to protect her, because they perceive her as being fragile at this point. So Lorelai and Rory have a big fight out in the middle of the street. Pretty rough scene.
Yeah, Rory gets kind of nasty. So I will say, like, I get where Rory's coming from, but I do feel like the things that she says to Lorelai are kind of uncalled for. Because she says, you'll just break up again and probably get back together again, and you'll be crying, and I don't really want to deal with any of it, so just tell me when you're in the final inning or something. Which is pretty nasty.
But also honest and astute.
Yes, they had already broken up at one point. But I also think that Rory is just lashing out, and she has, you know, found a potential flaw to lash out about. She's got a lot of big feelings, and she's not dealing with them.
Well, and I think Rory has... It's been a year of transition for her in a lot of ways. So she's this new school with new people, new teachers, a new culture. Her mom has dated her teacher, which has been difficult for her, and yet she put up with it and dealt with it. And then her mother broke up with her teacher, and which is what she predicted all along. You know, Rory kept saying, "You're going to break up with him, and he's still going to be my teacher."
To be fair, he technically broke up with her.
Well, true. That's true. And then Lane, her relationship with Lane has had to change. You know, it was it was just the nature of the beast. It's, if you're not going to school together every day, even if you're good friends, you're only going to see each other in the evening and on the weekends. And of course, during this year, Rory had her first boyfriend, which intruded on the time with her best friend. So it's been a year of transition. And towards the end of this year, she breaks up with Dean.
Yeah.
Or he breaks up with her. We're not. It's kind of a little bit of both, and actually that comes out later in the episode. But so that's happened. She's still feeling fragile from that and from everything that's going on. And then here are these people once again, and you have mentioned this before, that the whole town sees it as their mutual group responsibility to take care of Rory and to parent her and to protect her.
Yeah.
Like she's this fragile child. And here are these two people that she loves the most in the world who are doing it to her in a way that makes her just feel awful.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's a difficult scene, and it ends with Rory running away from home.
Yes, yeah. They agree to meet up at home, and when Lorelai gets there, Rory is gone, and Lorelai can't find her.
And it's difficult. For me as a parent, she walks through the house, but it doesn't occur to her that she's run away. I mean, that kind of happens over the coming hours.
Yes.
So then we cut to the grandparents, and we realize she has run away to her grandparents' house, taken a cab there, which probably costs an arm and a leg because it's, 30 minutes away. As soon as I see her at her grandmother's door, my first thought is one of these three people needs to call Lorelai immediately because she's going to freak the fuck out. Any good mother would. And it's, I don't know how much time has gone by, but by the time that Emily finally does call, takes her time and gloats a little bit about this. Yeah. Well, look, she ran away to us, which really bothers me about Emily. She does gloat a lot of times, but I can't imagine as a mother, this seems out of character, as a mother that she wouldn't immediately say to Rory, it's fine for you to stay here, but you need to call your mother right now because she's going to be scared. Yeah. And why didn't the writers have Emily do that?
Yeah, well, I'm not even sure that I view it as gloating so much as rejoicing in her ability to take control of the situation, because it feels like she immediately when she calls Lorelai, she does call Lorelai, and to be fair, some of the wait time might be that it took Rory a while to get there, because it would have been half an hour to a 45-minute cab ride, but it the way that Emily acts on the phone is she's very controlling of the situation. Everything that Lorelai asks for, Emily shuts down. She's like, she won't let her talk to Rory. She won't even
pissed
agree.
Me off. Because that's wrong. I'm sorry. This is not your child. This is Lorelai's child. She needs to speak to her, know that she's safe. Yeah. And that really bothered me. This whole thing with Emily just really, the way she handles it is wrong.
It feels like she is using concern for Rory's feelings as an excuse to kind of control Lorelai's access to her, basically.
Yep. And that's wrong. It's hurtful, it's manipulative, and this is exactly why Lorelai left home. Yeah. Because her mother is this kind of person. But you would think that as a mother whose own daughter ran away, that she would not act this way. I was really disappointed in Emily's.
Yeah, I mean, Emily is a complicated character, and I feel like in a way it's like she doesn't even view this situation as Lorelai is missing her daughter. I mean, I feel like the way that she views Rory is like a second chance at Lorelai, a second chance at the Lorelai that she actually wanted. So I feel like in a way she almost doesn't even view Lorelai as Rory's mom so much as as a competing mom. And
the other thing in this scene is that why doesn't Rory call? Because she has been in a situation before where her mother has freaked out the night she stayed out all night, and she knows what the rules are, that her mother needs to know where she is. Any good parent is going to have that rule. So why does she let her mother suffer like this? It's very selfish.
Yeah, it is very selfish. I mean, I think Rory's been pretty selfish this whole episode, and to an extent that's understandable because she is suffering and she's not dealing with it, and she is 16. But I do think that this is kind of poor behavior on both Rory and Emily's parts. They're
Yeah.
definitely being really insensitive to Lorelai, who has not really done anything wrong.
No,
Like,
she has not really.
Yeah, like, I understand why Rory is upset about Lorelai not telling her about Max, but Lorelai's reasons made perfect sense. She,
Yeah.
she didn't want to throw her happiness in her daughter's face in the middle of her daughter's own heartbreak. That
Yeah.
makes sense. And, like, I feel like it's Rory's own self-centeredness that keeps her from, like, accepting that reasoning. Because it's almost like when Lorelai tells her that, it's like Rory doesn't even want to hear it.
I think it is that, but I think it's also that Rory has really not yet worked through what happened with Dean.
Yeah.
So, and she's refusing to work through it.
Yeah.
And actually, at the end of this episode, her mother helps her with that, which is probably the whole point of the episode. But before we move on, I just want to back up just a little bit. The beginning of the scene before Rory arrives at the at the door. Richard and Emily are arguing because Emily has had several functions this week that Richard had to attend. She's trying to tie his tie.
Yeah, they're getting ready to go to a
They're getting ready
right?
to go to one of them, and he's frustrated. He hasn't had enough time to read his newspaper, damn it. So he's had to be too social this week. And my thought about this almost instantly was, this is a classic. If we're going to talk about now and in the future the roles of men and women and how they're treated in film and in TV, the women's obligations are never as important as the man's. Emily goes to everything that Richard drags her to. Mm-hmm. She is the social wife.
She rarely complains.
She never complains. She knows it's her job. It's her role in their marriage, and she fulfills it. And in exchange for that, she has a really nice life. Mm-hmm. So the tables are a little turned here, and he's had to go to more than one event in a week, and he's complaining about it like a little baby, and I wanted to slap him.
Yeah.
And, it's like, no, I'm sorry, but what she does helps your career. Mm-hmm. What she does is important to her. More importantly than that is that what she does is her work. It's important to her. She serves on a lot of boards. She supports a lot of charities, and you need to get out over it. This is what she does. You need to support her just the way she supports you, whether or not you see these people that you're going to see at this event as ridiculous or it doesn't matter. It's what you're doing for her.
Based on their conversation, what they're going to is a fundraiser for the Horticultural Society, which she says she is the head of. On
the board.
This is literally like her thing. She says she's the head of it. So, this is, her function, that it's very important for her to be there. And he's throwing this little fit.
Temper tantrum. And it's important to her life. It's who she is. It speaks to what she has done with her life and how she uses her talents and skills. And he has no respect for that. Yeah. And it's just really was a kind of an aggravating scene for me, and I needed to call it out. And I think it's unclear whether or not they continue with their plans to leave for the evening. She's old enough to be home by herself.
I mean, I think it's implied that they don't, because Richard is happy to see her, and when Emily tells him to say something encouraging to her, his response is, "Rory, I'm sorry you're upset, but I applaud your timing." Which I think implies that they're not going to leave her alone.
They're going to stay home, So she can probably blow it off by saying, "Oh, I've had a personal emergency," and not show up. So I guess that's it, But it's still not. They don't clarify that that's what happened. I just want to say it was just a scene that I really didn't like. I mean, it made me think too that everybody in this episode has been contentious. Richard is contentious because he has to give up several evenings in 1 week. Rory is contentious with everybody, and it's kind of a theme.
And it also feels like the way that they've set up this scene, it feels like the show is on Richard's side, which feels kind of shitty. Because, again, like you were saying, this is Emily's thing. This is what she does. But because of the way that the scene plays out, they're playing his desire not to go for laughs, and then in the end he gets his way because Rory shows up. So it's just I don't know, I feel like Emily's not really asking for that much, show, actually.
The dialogue is very minimalizing of what she does. So instead of saying that the Horticultural Society at first, they talk about this particular plant that they're trying to save. And it's such a difficult name, I didn't even write it down. So it's like to minimize the importance of what they're doing. This is just silly, making it feel silly. And then we find out, well, but it's a fundraiser for the Horticultural Society, and she's on the board. So it's important to her. Whether it's trivial or not, it's important to her.
And it's certainly not any more trivial than whatever frickin' financial dude party he drags her along to,
all the time. Anyway, so my issue with Richard is that my issue with Emily is that she trivializes her daughter's feelings on this and convinces her not to come and get Rory. And then we find out the next day that Lorelai is so upset about this that she's gotten into her car 3 times and started to drive to Hartford and then turned around and the 3rd time ran out of gas.
Oh, I did want to talk about the scene. So after Lorelai finds out that Rory is at the grandparents' house, Max is there. And I did kind of want to talk about their exchange a little bit.
Well, and the reason Max is there is that she's called in the troops. She's called Max, she's called Suki. She's got everybody looking for her daughter. So that's the background to this.
And Suki leaves to go check Dean's place. So Max and Lorelai are alone when Emily finally calls. So he's the only one who's there when she finds out what's going on, and she expresses to him her feelings about the situation. He thinks now that they know where Rory is that everything is fine, but she is obviously upset. He can't know what the other side of the conversation was, but it makes total sense that Lorelai is upset, not just for where Rory chose to go, but also that conversation that she just had with Emily, which was frustrating to the max, frustrating to say the least. And so she no longer has to worry about where Rory is, but she's still pretty upset. And Max asks if he can ask her a personal question, and she says that he has certainly earned that because he showed up for this, which okay, yeah, it's good that he showed up for this. But then he immediately asks her why she didn't tell Rory that they were talking again, and whether she has told anyone, which she says no, and then he's upset about that. And I'm just I don't really feel like he has I guess he's not that upset, but I don't really feel like he has a right to be upset. First of all, it's only been 2 weeks. They say that. They've been talking for 2 weeks. It's only been on the phone. And also, as we know, he dumped her last time.
Yep.
I think it kind of makes sense if she's maybe a little bit gun shy, because he dumped her right at the moment that she was ready to finally commit to him.
He's a selfish asshole.
Yeah.
And it's not that a personal question he wants to ask her. It's a question about him and his needs. So again, both Richard and Max in these scenes have made everything in their lives with these women about them. And I hate to sound like the angry feminist that I am, but it happens over and over again. And here's the thing. We see this in TV shows all the time. And it's never questioned. It's I actually there have been a couple of recent TV shows that I've watched that I have just been enraptured by, because the women are treated as equal in terms of their needs with the men. And Ted Lasso, for example, and I know everybody in the world is gaga about Ted Lasso, but the thing that I love about it, that I keep seeing over and over again, is how the women in this show are fully fleshed out characters and supportive of each other and loving to each other, and the friendships are just so positive. And it made me realize that in so many TV shows, and it's more so that than movies, because there's longer, more drawn out stories. Too often, female friendship is treated as bitchy, or it's not always loving. And my experience has never been like the experience in most television shows. My experience with my friends is loving. And so when I see, and I can't think of the character's name, but Hannah Waddington's character in Ted Lasso, embracing her female friends, this just feels real to me, and it's loving, and it's something we need to see more of because it's true. And especially, in shows about teenagers where, like Lane and Rory, and they do make up at the end of this episode, and they do have a close relationship, but a lot of their relationship this season has been fraught with conflicts based on Rory's immaturity that that happen because of her immaturity.
Yeah, even though, like, it is often a loving relationship, it is kind of one-sided. It's always more about Rory than it is about Lane.
Exactly. And that's just not, in my experience, that is not always, maybe it's true in high school because girls are still, maturing and figuring out who they are. So maybe that's all true. But when we see these men getting laughs in this show or getting story time, I mean, like... Yeah. FaceTime, getting, what's the word I want? Screen time. Getting screen time as selfish assholes who get to say funny things. I don't think that's a good thing to reinforce. I think we should be teaching men, and that men should be, if they're going to be realistic in this modern era, because this was 20 years ago, I got to remember that. We hadn't really gotten through the Me Too thing and everything, and so it is out of perspective that way, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's not even just that they're portrayed this way, but that it feels like the framing portrays them as correct.
Yes.
Like, that Richard is right to be so annoyed about going to this, and that Max is right to be kind of upset or concerned.
That he wasn't her first concern.
Yeah.
That her daughter was her first concern. Upset over this. That is legitimate. And it's not.
That she hasn't gone around and told everyone that they've gotten back together, which I'm just like... You haven't fully gotten back together yet. You haven't even gone on a date. You've just been talking on the phone. Like, I don't actually feel the need to broadcast to everyone that I'm having phone conversations with a person. Like, it's like not that big a deal. And on top of that, she has every reason to be a little gun shy with him specifically.
Oh, God, yeah.
Already dumped her once.
And not only dumped her, but insisted that they embark on the relationship to begin with, even though she had concerns and misgivings about him being her daughter's teacher from the get-go. And she has told him this, and I'm slamming on the table. That's going to come up on the microphone. But she told him from the beginning, this is difficult to me. She has told him every step of the way, and he has never listened to her. It's always been about what Max wanted. I don't come away from this episode feeling like that is something the writers and producers want me to feel bad about.
Yeah.
It's like the romance is the most important thing. It doesn't matter that Lorelai is in this situation or that Rory is in this situation. All that matters is that Max gets what he wants, and I'm exaggerating, but that's kind of the feel that I get.
It is kind of like all that matters is that Max is like a charming and attractive guy, and we don't actually examine all of the ways in which he is very selfish and would maybe not actually make a great partner for Lorelai because of said selfishness. We just sort of push past it and then frame it like it's Lorelai's problem.
And the thing is, we can see, I think you and I can see anyway, that if Max and Lorelai were to get together, were to get married, she could probably transform him into a better person. But that is the emotional work that women are expected to do that we should not have to do. And then when you compare him to Luke, who is a fully fleshed out, responsible human being who does not think that Lorelai has to take care of him or his feelings. Mm-hmm. Wow, what a contrast there. Yeah. Hands down, Luke is the better dude. So
yeah. Yeah, and yeah, the very I guess it's not the very next scene, but like we very shortly after that get the Luke and Lorelai scene where she tells Luke that Rory ran away. And to be fair, he does have his own emotional reaction because she tells him that Rory ran away and does not immediately tell him that she's safe.
Yes.
So he's just panicking about Rory.
Because he loves Rory.
Rory's dad.
And he's a responsible human being.
Yeah. But then he very quickly turns that into just being emotionally supportive of Lorelai, and he kind of helps her fantasize about fucking up Dean. Which, is definitely something that he is also enjoying, but you can tell that it's also like, this is what Lorelai needed. She needed someone to kind of be in the same emotional space with her and vent about this situation that she's kind of powerless over. Like part of what's happening with Lorelai here is she can't protect Rory from heartbreak. Heartbreak has happened, and now Rory is kind of spinning out, and Lorelai just has to helplessly witness it because there's nothing she can do. And it feels like Luke is the only one who gets that in this episode.
And that's funny that you say that, because my very next bullet point that I, in my notes, is that Lorelai and all the adults in Rory's life do treat her like a baby, but you can't protect your kid from breakup sadness. You can't protect them from sadness overall. People are going to break up with you. They're going to break your heart. People are going to die. Yeah. People, are going to hurt you. It's part of that maturing that happens in the teen years and the early 20s, experiencing that for the first time. And then let me tell you, you get into your 50s and 60s and people your own age start dying, and you realize that it never stops. This awareness of what life is going to throw at you. But it starts in the teen years, usually with your first boyfriend or girlfriend and the first breakup, and how difficult that is. And the first one is the worst. And this is her worst one ever. I mean, it never gets easy, but it gets a little bit easier. And as you get older, you have the emotional skills, and the maturational point, development to cope with it a little bit better.
Yeah.
So, first of all, she's not doing that. She doesn't know that she needs to let herself grieve this relationship. That is something that teenagers generally, they want to fix it. They want it to be undone. They want it to go back, but they don't always know how to grieve. And that's something that Lorelai could actually help her with. And she does a lot of right things at the end of this episode. I got to credit Lorelai for this. She's been manic this whole episode. She's been off the walls, but the ending of this episode is kind of perfect in how she handles it. So
we skipped past a not very important scene, but it was kind of funny. Rory wakes up at the grandparents' house, and Emily has given her skirt to their current help person, Rosa, to press, and also says that Rosa can make her a Pop-Tart from scratch. And also just rattles off every dessert food under the sun. They have pancakes, they have blintzes.
They have eggs and bacon too. She says, we can make you whatever you want, and the interesting thing in this scene is that you're talking to a teenager whose whole life revolves around eating out, eating pizza that's been delivered, eating Pop-Tarts on the way to school. She doesn't get a real meal, except on Friday nights at her grandparents' house. But they not only say, we've got all these things you can have. She chooses eggs, and I think they give her a waffle with that too, because you can see the plate has a waffle and strawberries on it. So she gets some good food. And they make her a lunch that actually has a decent sandwich in it. They make her a real lunch that she can take to school. So the contrast with that and Lorelai is just amazing.
Hilariously, I do feel like if she wanted to, she could probably eat a real meal every time they go to Luke's. It seems very clear that he does offer healthy options. They just don't choose those.
They don't choose them, and they never finish a meal.
And they never finish their meal.
They get coffee and then they go. So they have to have those Pop-Tarts at home because that's the only thing they're eating. So. Yes.
Okay, and then I think the other important scene, we don't have to go into it that deeply, but we do need to say that it happened after Luke and Lorelai are talking. Lorelai actually goes to the store and ends up confronting Dean, at which point he tells her the truth about the breakup that she hasn't known yet.
Very important scene.
Which is that he said, "I love you," and Rory just sat there. Lorelai has not known this detail this whole time because Rory has not wanted to talk about it. So she just thinks that Dean just dumped Rory out of nowhere. And, of course, we have known this whole time that that's not true. And then Lorelai goes to the grandparents' house to pick up Rory, and she has kind of a funny exchange with Emily on the way to Rory's room at the grandparents' house, where Emily is just pressure talking at her, saying absolutely everything that she knows about Rory's status up till this moment. And Lorelai's like, okay, I don't need all that.
Yeah.
And then she goes into the room, and she and Rory kind of finally have the heart-to-heart that they have needed to have.
Before you go any further, there's a timeline problem here, because we started off, it was Wednesday, and then she ran away from home on Thursday. This is Friday, and Friday night is their night at the grandparents' house. So she's picking her up after school, because Lori she went to school, right? So she comes back to the grandparents' house after school. So presumably she's going to pick her up from her parents' house and go home and then come back for dinner.
Right back.
Yeah, so just throw that out there, because they don't pay any attention to reality and time-wise in this show, as we know.
Yeah.
So anyway.
What did you want to talk about Lorelai and Rory's conversation? I have some mixed feelings about it, although I do think that Lorelai's speech is what Rory needs to hear in that moment.
I can't visualize where it happened. You're saying it happened in the bedroom?
It happens at the grandparents' house. Okay. Yeah, it happens in the bedroom that Emily made up for Rory with the NSYNC posters on the wall.
Oh, that's right. And there's sunflowers.
Yeah, fresh sunflowers. Which I did make a note. Does Emily replace the sunflowers in this room every week? Like
automatically in hopes that her granddaughter will come over? I don't know, but it's also out of season for sunflowers. But they are small ones. Yeah. She probably has a source where she gets them. But yeah, I think so. Lorelai talks to Rory about her own commitment issues.
Yes,
and she admits to her, "I am the only role model you have, and I am not a good one in terms of commitment." And she asks her, I think towards the end of the conversation, well, why is that, Mom? And she doesn't really know. But she says, you do not have to have those kinds of commitment issues just because I have them. We are different people. And you have to experience your relationships the way it feels right to you. And if somebody tells you they love you, if you love them back, it's okay to go ahead and say that to them. She gives her good advice. You have to admit love if you want to experience it, even if it hurts later on. And she also tells her that getting hurt is part of the process. It's part of life. And unless you just find the one person for you when you're 16 that you're going to be with for the next 80 years, which is, not most people's modern experiences.
Unlikely.
Anyway, very unlikely. So yeah, she gives her good advice about it, and she does admit to her that her own commitment issues are, and we don't know why Lorelai has these commitment issues. I mean, she's a very complicated person, and it could have something to do with having a baby at such a young age. There's a lot going on in her mind.
Yeah, I feel like we are a little bit quick to call them commitment issues. Like, just because someone has not committed yet, I don't think necessarily means they have issues. I think she has had a pretty practical reason not to commit to anyone up until now, and that is that she has a child and she doesn't want to subject Rory to her own painful breakups. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that I think that all single moms should not date. I don't think that, but I guess, I am now pretty close to Lorelai's age, and I am in a committed relationship, but also I don't think there's anything wrong with being 32 to whatever age and not being in a committed relationship or not having found the right relationship yet. And I feel like that's part of what is happening, especially when we consider what just happened with her and Max. She did finally commit to Max, and in that moment he broke up with her. And I feel like that we're using that as if that's more evidence for her commitment issues, but it's not. She was having some issue committing to him in that episode, but she was kind of proven right, because the moment she committed to him, he dumped her.
Yeah.
So it's I don't know if that's really her having a commitment issue so much as an issue of bad timing, and also of Max maybe not being the right person for her.
I agree with you, but she's the one who calls it commitment issues in the scene.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a common, this is part of my issue with it, is that I feel like there is this cultural narrative that all children need to be raised by married people or else they'll never understand how to have a relationship. And I just don't think that's true. And I don't think that the show is trying to say that, but I do think that the way the show presents this feeds into that narrative, if that makes sense. And
it does.
My other side of this is I do think this is what Rory needed to hear, but not because of Dean. I feel like she needed to hear this because her problem this episode is that she hasn't been opening up to Lane or her mom. And I feel like this conversation does allow her to finally do that. But I am also of the opinion that I don't think she owed it to Dean to say I love you if she wasn't ready yet.
Oh, I agree. She's 16. I mean, presumably.
Yeah,
16,
exactly.
17. They're both very young. It's a very hard thing even for older people to say to one another. So I think I wasn't surprised at all by her reticence in that scene in the car. And he's also just given her a car. So, I mean, it's a car he's building, but still.
It was a lot of pressure in one moment.
A lot of pressure in that one scene. And this is her first boyfriend. It's not his first girlfriend. He doesn't recognize that. He doesn't want to. And again, so he's number 3. Dean, it's all about him. Because she doesn't say, I love you back. In that moment, he breaks up with her forever. Really? So he could have said to her, well, two things in the scene. Emily could have said to Lorelai, when Lorelai is saying, I need to come over and see her, she could have said to her, I know that you feel that way right now, and I understand that, and I would feel the same way, but I think Rory needs to be alone with her thoughts for a while. She had structured her comments in that way. I think that scene would have been a lot easier for me to live with and a lot easier for Lorelai to live with. And Dean, if he had understood in the moment with Rory when he told her he loved her, if he'd understood, or if he'd even prefaced it with, you may not be ready to say this back to me, but I want you to know that I love you. Mm-hmm. And but he doesn't do it. And I don't think it's a maturational thing because he's had a girlfriend before. And for the most part, he comes across, most of the time, he's fairly mature for his, for a teenage boy. But again, the men in this show, other than Luke, are very, very self-centered and very focused on their own needs, oblivious to the needs of the women in their lives. And it's just another character.
With both Max and Dean, it is this kind of weird, like, they are both hung up on the woman they want to express commitment to, like, not expressing the exact same level of commitment exactly when they want them to.
At the same moment, yes. Yeah. It's like, they don't even want to give them time to grow into it or to think about it. Why haven't you been thinking about this already? We've been together for 3 seconds. Why don't you... Why don't you love me? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's a very immature approach.
I am much more ready to be lenient on Dean here than Max, both because he is younger and also because he hadn't previously dumped Rory, like, in that moment. I feel like I'm floored by Max's... Not even Max's behavior, because he's not, like, that belligerent about it, but I am floored by the show framing Max as right after... what just happened with them. Yeah.
Well, interestingly, I'm not sure they frame Dean as being right because they don't really give him any credit for they don't make it. Yeah, I mean, we definitely have a feeling after that scene and remembering that scene that Rory was the one who was right. And Dean was the one who was wrong. So
and I will also say that I don't think Dean deserved to be, like, harassed by the rest of the town because they broke up. Because I don't think that would have been true no matter why they broke up. Like, it's just not the rest of the town's business.
But she's the town's baby.
But she's the town's baby.
And he's new to town.
Yeah.
He's just moved there. So Rory and Lorelai come to an understanding. They go back to town. And the last scene.
2 more brief scenes. There's like a half scene where it's 2 more half scenes.
Where, 2 more half scenes.
Lorelai like slows down the car and Rory gets out to go make up with Lane.
And she doesn't even have to say anything. She's just running up the steps, and Lane comes out and hugs her. I mean, it's like that's that kind of supportive love that I think is not depicted often enough in television, where women support each other and understand each other and appreciate each other. Anyway, so I think that's a great scene. And then we cut to the last scene, which is funny. Yeah, but also ridiculous.
But infuriating.
Infuriating.
Yeah, so Lorelai calls Max to let him know that she's going to call every single person in her, like, book of people. Every person that she knows. In her address book. To let them know that they're talking again, and that she's also going to put little, like, notes on the pillows of everyone who comes to stay at the inn saying that they're back together, which is very funny.
But then she doesn't.
But then she does it,
She starts to do it, and it's like, it's a funny joke. It's not something you want to follow through on.
And it's also like, I would have preferred the scene if Max had responded to the joke by saying, I realized that I overreacted and I should not be pressuring you to tell anyone about us. You tell people about us in your own time. That's not what matters to me. Like, that's how the scene should have ended. But instead they're like, nope, Max was right and she's going to call everyone and tell them.
And, or even if she just picked up a phone and called Suki and said,
Yeah.
I need to tell you something.
Except Suki knows, because Suki was in the previous scene where Max was there, and she wasn't like, why is Max here?
She must know.
I think she told Suki already.
Good observation. I hadn't thought about that. You're right. She must have told Suki, yeah.
Yeah. So, which is like, who else does she really need to tell other than Suki and Rory? And they both know.
Yeah.
And she had a good reason for not telling Rory. A reason that had fucking nothing to do with Max or her own supposed commitment issues. I think her reasoning made absolute sense, and I believe it. And I probably would have done the same thing if I were her. Because, you do want to do it when, like, her reasoning was, I had a friend who got back together with their boyfriend right after I broke up with mine in high school, and then she rubbed it in my face all the time, and I was miserable, and I didn't want to repeat that mistake with Rory, which is like, yeah, that's what you try to do as a parent. You try to prevent them from going through, like, the worst things that you went through that were avoidable, So
and sometimes you can't. So you do one or two things. You either want to coach them so that they don't go through the things that you went through, because they learn from your experience. But in some issues, you can't do that. And what you want to do then is just be the one sitting there, rubbing their back and saying, I know it hurts. And that is all you can do, because everybody has to feel their own pain and work through it in their own ways. They can listen to the advice of their parents and their friends and put it all together and through their own experience come to, a meaningful way in their life of dealing with this kind of heartache. But you have to do it on your own. So, do you have final thoughts on this?
I mean, I think I kind of already said them, I do think that Lorelai's speech at the end is what Rory needs to hear, even though I fundamentally disagree with the idea that a child raised by a single parent will not understand how to have a relationship.
I agree.
And I feel like that's kind of a bad I think it's kind of an anti-feminist concept, because it's meant to discourage women from being single mothers, and there is nothing inherently wrong with being a single mother if that's what you want to be.
But, the majority of people who have a problem with single mothers are the ones who say, well, you have to have a father. There has to be a father in that child's life. And I've always felt that it is much easier and works, for the most part, a little bit better if you have two parents parenting a child. But it doesn't have to be a man and a woman. It can be two women. It can be two men. So, I mean, I see, gay couples all the time. And not just gay couples, but, people who parent children together, who are helpful, who, are friends. And as long as you have extra support, of course it's going to be better. Of course it's going to be easier.
Yeah, but that's just because it's a lot of work to raise a child.
I was going to say, you will make fewer mistakes the more support you have. And that is crucial. But that doesn't mean that women can't do it by themselves. Or that men can't. If you're a good parent, you can do it.
Yeah, and if we're getting right down to it, yes, it's definitely easier to raise a child when you have at least one person to share the burden with. And you know what? It's going to be even easier if you have more than one person to share the burden with. If we weren't so set on these nuclear families where it's just these two people locked together in a room to raise children, if we had a more community-based approach, like Lorelai has. She has a whole town to help her with Rory.
Yes, and actually, that brings me to my summary point, is that what I love about the modern TV shows that I've been watching lately is the way they approach friendships in a sort of community organizing principle. So like Ted Lasso, there's a community there, there's a team, there's a set of friends, and they all support each other in different ways. There's another show that I just started to watch, it's called Shrinking. Harrison Ford is in it. First TV show he's ever done. And so is that guy from How I Met Your Mother, the one who was married to the woman who was in Buffy.
Jason Segel.
Thank you. I knew if I gave you enough clues, you'd come up with it, because my memory is shot.
He played Marshall, and he was married to Lily, who was played by Allison
Stop
Hannigan,
it. Stop it.
Who was
Stop
Willow
it.
from Buffy.
Okay, so thank you, my memory brain. Anyway, so Jason Segel has basically written and developed and produces this show, and it's just he's a psychiatrist or psychologist. They haven't really said what kind of doctor they, but there's him, there's Harrison Ford, and there's a young black woman, and they support each other in interesting and antagonizing kind of ways, but also very they're psychiatrists, right, or psychologists or whatever. So when they make statements that are too ridiculous, they'll say, "Oh, that was kind of not racist, but that wasn't being very honest about what black women experience," or anyways, it's that kind of thing. So they catch themselves immediately saying things that are stupid. But there's also just this big community, and the dialogue that they have with each other is very supportive, and it's a community of friends, loving friends, and that seems to be a new thing in TV shows. I mean, they've always been communities, like Scrubs had a community, but and ensemble cast TV shows. But it just seems to be a trend right now that these community groups, they might even start kind of apart, but then they come together over the course of the show. It certainly happened in Ted Lasso. Anyway, I like that about modern TV shows, and I like that part of what's happening in the Gilmore Girls, but it hasn't matured yet. There's still a dependence on these old-fashioned tropes. I mean, these women have to solve all the problems.
It's like heteronormative tropes.
Yeah, and men get taken care of. And what I love about these two shows that I just mentioned is that they're upending that. They're throwing it on its ear, and it's wonderful to see. And they don't do it in a way that suggests that they have all the answers. A lot of times they're asking questions, but that's where you start, is you ask questions. And I think Lorelai does that to some extent, but not everybody in the show does. So I am not at all sad that we will be ending our Gilmore Girls podcast in one more episode, because I'm looking forward to where we take these conversations into the future with other TV shows that have gotten better over the last 2 decades, and with movies that depict women's lives truthfully and compassionately. So that, dear listeners, is all for today.
I'm Tessa Dare, and you can find me at my website, tessadare.com. That's TESSADAIR.com, where you can sign up for my email list. Or you can follow me on Instagram at author.tess.adair or on TikTok at author.tess.adair. And if you want to support us on Patreon, we are at patreon.com/whereyoulead.
And I am Beth Von Barron. You can follow me on Instagram at STL_writer_Beth, or sign up for my weekly Substack email, Saturday Morning Musings, at stlwriterbeth.substack.com. This has been Where You Lead, our fun and terribly insightful and witty podcast about the Gilmore Girls from the perspective of a mother and daughter. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll tune in for our next episode, our last episode, in 2 weeks. See you then.